Nashville, what's up? How y'all doing? All right. So my name is Marcus Whitney. I'm here to talk to you today about the hustle and how learning how to truly hustle can change your world. Before I get into it, I need you all to sign off on a disclaimer. So I'm probably going to talk about some things that may come off a little bit unethical, and I'm not in any way endorsing that you do anything unethical. But I'm going to use some unethical examples to explain how hustling really works. And the point is that hustling is neither good or bad. It's all in how you do it. So do you all sign off on that? All right, cool. So hustling's not a new topic, right? We've all heard about the hustle before. And these days, we hear about it a lot from this guy. His name is Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a social media thought leader and best-selling author, and he's great. And typically, the message that comes across is that hustle equals work hard. But is that all that there really is to the hustle? Is it just about working hard? It's really romantic and noble to think that hustling is just about working hard, but there's a dark side of the hustle that I became attracted to as a young man. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and growing up in Brooklyn, thank you, growing up in Brooklyn meant that it was likely at my time that I would be in love with hip-hop music, and I was, and I still am today. And if you're interested in knowing what I listen to, you can check out my Spotify feed. Now, in 1991, I heard the term hustler, and it was tied to a visual that made a profound impact on my life and many other kids in my generation. It was Ice-T's hit single from the movie New Jack City, New Jack Hustler. In the movie, Nino Brown, who's the main character, could be considered a hard worker, but I don't think that's what Ice-T was referring to. And it's also worth noting that things didn't work out well for Nino Brown. And that's because selling drugs and enforcing your business with violence is a very tough road, and generally speaking, not recommended. A little bit after that, I found Jay-Z. And Jay-Z was actually from Brooklyn, and he's just a little bit older than I was, and so I really identified with him. Not so much what he talked about, but his surroundings. But I have to admit, he made me want to identify with what he talked about because his raps are a hustle in and of themselves. His raps were hustling me. A little bit later, I got into classic movies and I saw The Hustler, starring Paul Newman and Jackie Gleason. And again, this was not about hard work. This was about deception. Making someone think one thing to drop their guard so that you could strike and win. And in this case, it's playing pool to win lots of money. But just like Nino Brown, Fast Eddie didn't end up a happy man in the end. Now, I got a lot of confusing messages around the hustle because I played a lot of sports in high school. And every single coach I ever had, no matter what the sport was, during practice or game time would always say, "Hustle, Marcus." And that was clearly a call for me to work harder, run faster, play with greater effort. Hustle. This is one word, but two very, very different meanings. And I had no idea how important it would be for me to combine the messages from positive role models in my life to work hard with the messages from a genre of artists who grew up in low-income neighborhoods with poor schools that dreamt of a better life but were inspired by deceptive hustlers. Rick Ross. Rick Ross started his career with a song called Hustlin'. And he goes like this: "I know Pablo, Noriega, the real Noriega. He owe me 100 favors." That's probably not true. But what is true is that he's really on the cover of Rolling Stone, and that jewelry that he's wearing really costs a lot of money, and he's got the #1 album in America this week. And why is that? It's because culturally, we admire people who are able to change their world by embodying somebody who previously they were not. That's the hustle. So last year I had a moment of clarity around hustling and how important it had been in my life, and it didn't come through meditation or some flash of inspiration. It came while I was watching a movie. So like many of you, I saw American Hustle last year. It's a great movie. And I got a lot of clarity and insight on just how important the hustle had been in my life. And so from this point forward, I'm going to talk about what I've found to be the 3 simple rules of hustling. I'm going to tell it through my own story, but I hope that you'll find that these rules will apply to any hustler story, hopefully yours. But before I get started with that, I want to talk about how hustling works. And not the working hard type of hustle, but the kind that's deceptive. Hustling is a human hack. Successful hustlers know how people think, and they use that to get what they want. Any good hustler knows that people are all irrational. And even though we try to think that we are rational thinkers, none of us at the core are. We all suck at being rational. And here's why. Most of how we interact with the world happens through a process called cognition. It's where all of the stimulus that we encounter on a day-to-day basis gets transformed into knowledge. We take that knowledge and we apply it to the decisions and actions that we want to take. We exhibit behaviors, we take actions, and that generates results in our life. And then that factors back into cognition as it creates new stimulus. It's a pretty beautiful system if you think about it. But we're humans, which means we're fundamentally flawed. And the fundamental flaw of cognition is called cognitive bias, which means a tendency to think certain ways. Now, I got that from Wikipedia, so don't try and call me out on that later, all right? I also got from Wikipedia that there are over 170 registered types of cognitive bias. It's kind of funny how incredibly predictable we are in our thought patterns, but yet we think that we're so unique in the way that we think. So now here's how cognition works. Stimulus comes in, it gets hit by an avalanche of bias, and then on the other side, you've got perceived stimulus, which is incredibly predictable and very easily hackable. And that's what hustlers compromise. Got it? All right, cool. So in 2000, I moved to Nashville. I've got one child, one on the way. I'm waiting tables, and I live in an efficiency apartment. It's not really where I thought I would be, but it's exactly where I was. I didn't have a college degree, and I didn't know anybody in the city. I knew when I thought back to my hobbies as a child that I really would love to have been a programmer. Programming was a profession I would love, and it would allow me to be able to take care of my family. But there was nothing in my surroundings that reflected the reality that I could actually do that. And every day I would come home from work with cash in hand from the tips that I would make, and that didn't help me break out of my current cycle. Irving Rosenfeld, the main character in American Hustle, was a loan shark, and he took advantage of people in my situation. These were people who needed a change in their life, and they thought they needed a lump sum of money right away, to start a business, to buy a home, whatever. But they couldn't see themselves in the future and understand all the steps they would need to take in order to make that happen on their own. And so Irving would come in with a very, very sweet offer that was almost certainly too good to be true. All of Irving's victims suffered from current moment bias, which is the tendency to prefer immediate payoffs versus payoffs down the line. Now, I know everybody in this room can think of one moment in your life where you went for the quick fix. You went for that immediate payoff. Well, you'll be happy to know that this is a pattern in your brain, and it's not the true you. But it is very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And while people might say follow your passion and believe in yourself and all this rah-rah stuff, at the end of the day, you have to be clever enough to overcome these biases in your brain, which leads us to the number one rule of hustling. Lie. In Irving Rosenfeld's case, he lied to other people and stole their money. It's not a very honorable hustle. Jay-Z would take a story and put in some reality but also some exaggerations. A pool shark, they will pretend that they aren't very good at pool just to sucker you in so they can win. All of those, not necessarily very honorable hustles, not what I'm actually advocating for. In my case, and what I am advocating for, I lied to myself. I told myself one day, I'm a programmer. And then I started to change my environment around me to support that lie. I started attending user group meetings at a web shop that's downtown called Weberize. It's got Chris Mosier at the top. He organized most of them. I started building really, really awful websites for people to barter for things that my family needed. And I made a new friend. His name is Chris Alexander at the bottom. And he was in the tech scene here in Nashville. And so he showed me the ropes of Cummins Station, which is where most of the activity in the tech scene was happening back then. So I started to hang around there all the time. And it got to the point where I really started to feel like I was a programmer. And so much so that I started applying for jobs. It didn't really make any sense, but I started doing it anyway. And what happened was other people around me in that environment they also started to believe what I had come to believe, that I was a programmer. And so the day after my youngest son was born, I got my first job offer to become a programmer at HealthStream. I assure you, I had to trick myself to think rationally, to go after my desire, and then get other people to buy into it. That's what Irving Rosenfeld means when he says that's the art of becoming somebody who people can pin their beliefs and their dreams on. In the 7 years after that first lie, I programmed well over 10,000 hours. That enabled me to be able to buy a house, to be able to create great educational opportunities for my children, and to really not have to worry about my family's future anymore. I also became the chief architect of the city's leading marketing platform, Emma. So at that point, it wasn't a lie anymore. I was a programmer. And yes, I had to work very, very hard to make that happen, but it was the combination of cunning and overcoming those limiting thoughts in the very beginning and then working my tail off afterwards to make sure that it wouldn't be a lie forever that made all the difference and changed my world. In that 7th year, 2007, I went to South by Southwest. I met Matt Mullenweg, who's the founder of WordPress. I saw Twitter launch and blow up, and I learned a ton. I realized that I didn't just want to work at a great tech city, at a great tech company in Nashville. I wanted Nashville to be a great tech city. And Austin was clearly doing a lot right in that regard. So I came back to Nashville, and then I convinced myself that I was going to bring the South by Southwest interactive experience that I had back to Nashville that very year. So an important note, just because you lie to yourself about being able to do something doesn't mean you can do it. And so that brings in rule number 2 of the hustle. Just like Irving and Sydney teamed up and 1 + 1 = 3 for them and their hustle, rule number 2, partner up. Every hustler has a blind spot, and a great partner will help you to find it and close it up. Clint Smith, who's the co-founder of Emma, introduced me to my future friend and co-founder of Barcamp Nashville, Dave Delaney. There's no doubt in my mind that I could not have founded Barcamp Nashville without Dave. He just brought in so much energy, such a fresh perspective, and he really helped me through that whole process. By show of hands, how many people here have been to Barcamp Nashville? Okay, cool. So for those of you who don't know what Barcamp Nashville is, it's essentially our city's free annual digital festival. It is intentionally disorganized, and thus it's called an unconference. So when we threw the first one, we had 600 people show up. They came for 12 hours. They got geek speak, beer, and Mexican food, and it was really pretty epic. And it was. And it was the first time, at least in the time that I had been there, that our city really was able to look around in one room and recognize our digital depth. And so it served as a catalyst for a lot of what we have going on in our tech community here today. You know, even though Dave and I both knew that Barcamp needed a Nashville, that Nashville needed a Barcamp, I was a programmer, but Dave was a marketer. And so I wanted all this geeky content, and Dave fought me and pushed me to make sure I had ample content for marketers in the program. And that made it a much more inclusive event, and I think enabled it to spawn to what it is today. So when you're picking a partner, make sure that you have somebody whose intuition, their insights, their background, and their skills complement yours, not overlap yours, because that's what makes for a dynamic hustle team. There are a lot of different biases that having a partner can help you overcome, but for me, the number one bias is called confirmation bias. That's essentially when we agree with people who agree with us. And Dave didn't allow me to do that. Dave helped me to see the other side of the story, and we made a great event as a result of that. Life happens. And really at the same time that I left Emma, and the same time that we launched Barcamp Nashville, for the right reasons, my ex-wife and I separated. So coming off of the success of Barcamp Nashville, my ambition was very, very high, but in reality, I was desperate. I wanted to see Nashville become this great tech city, but I was partnerless. And it remained that way for a year and a half, and as a result, my hustle game was kind of weak. So in 2009, that changed. Found the love of my life, full-time partner in crime, and that got my head and heart back in the right place, and so I was able to kind of get back on my game. So now that I'm back in the game, I decide I'm going to launch a social activation platform for brands, and I'm going to launch a tech accelerator, and I'm going to launch a media platform that's going to help put a spotlight on startups in the South. Oh yeah, and I have to raise my children. My beautiful, talented children. So I'm pretty good at overcoming my own limiting thoughts at this point. I've got my partner in crime, but I have not figured out time travel. And neither have you. So enter the third and final rule of the hustle that only deals with hustles of significant scale. Rule number 3, orchestrate. To arrange or direct the elements of a situation to produce a desired effect. Because as Jay-Z said, we don't believe you. You need more people. See, what orchestration deals with is a bias called bandwagon effect. It's how the TV show Punk'd worked. It's how flash mobs work. It's how surprise parties work. People believe things when lots of people are working in concert. So when you get lots of people working together in concert, you can pull off mass scale hustles. These guys look really happy right now, right? But if you saw American Hustle, you know they just got punked properly. This hustle was so elaborate that these two had no idea that they were being completely set up. And similarly, I can't run 3 companies at the same time. That's ridiculous. But what I can do is I can find great partners and work with great investors, stay in alignment with everybody to pull off grand hustles to help take our city where it can go. And you can do the same thing in your world. It's just orchestration. My most important project, my children, are certainly not done by me alone either. My parents, my co-founders in life, they have helped me in everything that I've ever wanted to do, and I'll never be able to repay them for all the hustling that they've done for me. My pops is not feeling well today, but my mom is here over there, and they just celebrated their 43rd anniversary. So happy anniversary, Mom. So, 2000, no real career, no real skills, no hair. 2014, standing here, sharing my idea, my story with the best crowd in the best city in the world. So far, so good. I'm going to keep hustling, and I hope that you will try to start hustling if you haven't already, and if you are a hustler, keep on. So one more time, the 3 rules of the hustle. Believe, but lie if you have to. Partner up, and orchestrate. I can't wait to see what you hustle up. Don't be afraid, because to dare is to do. Thank you.